Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg, and today is very exciting because I am going to talk about my pile of possibilities, or my TBR, if that's the terminology you are used to, for the month of September, specifically for Shorty September. So I have a list of 20 short books or novellas, whatever term you prefer. Now, I believe for the official Shorty September, they define a novella as less than 200 or less than 250. I have selected ones that are less than 200 pages for my purposes here today. I've already done a video about some of my favorite short novels or novellas, and I will link that one down below. I should do a bit of an update on that one because it's about 2 years old at this point, and there are some other books like Montana 1948 by Larry Watson that I would probably add to that list. But for this, I have specifically pulled from my bookshelves. I went through, found all of the books, well, not all of the books, but books that are under 200 pages that I would like to read in order to build this pile of 20 possibilities. I have checked to see which ones are available on audio through Libby, which works off of my library system. And I think at least 4 of them are available that way. So that gives me another way of possibly getting to them during this month. This list is prepared alphabetically by author. Now, I will put the video for the launch of Shorty September in the description box down below. There are prompts that you can follow if you are someone who enjoys doing that. I tend to sort of do my own thing. I don't always enjoy hitting prompts. It starts making it feel like work to me. So my way of participating is just finding my own shorties and trying to prioritize them in the month of September. These are not the only books that I have on my pile of possibilities, but they are the ones that are specifically for Shorty September, and for that reason, some of these are books that I've had for a while and would just kind of like to cross off my to-do list, if that makes sense. And as I said, we're going to start alphabetically and work our way down through the list. I will have links to all of these books on bookshop.org down below. If I spark an interest in them, you can use that link to get more information or make a purchase on these books, or you could support your local independent bookstore or check your local library. Some of these books are on the older side, so there's a great possibility that they will have them. Without further ado, let's jump in and start talking about them. I have pulled blurbs for all of the books, short ones. So, I could just hold up the book and tell you the title and then move on to the next one, but I don't feel like that would be a useful tool for you. So pulling a little bit from the description of the book is going to help me tell you what these books are about. So the first one is Waiting for Eden by Elliot Ackerman. The description of this one is, Eden lies in a hospital bed, unable to move or speak. His wife Mary spends every day on the sofa in his room. We see them through the eyes of Eden's best friend, a fellow Marine who didn't make it back home, and who must relive the secrets held between all 3 of them as he waits for Eden to finally mercifully die and join him in whatever comes after. A breathtakingly spare and shattering novel that explores the unseen after effects and unacknowledged casualties of war, Waiting for Eden is a piercingly insightful, deeply felt meditation on loyalty, friendship, betrayal, and love. It was recommended to me by Chelsea from Montana Book Company. I trust her opinion on literature. And I've since heard some good things about it in other places, and I can't wait to read it. And if you're interested, it is 125 pages, so a true shorty in every sense of the word. That's the first one. Next, we have On the Calculation of Volume 1 by Solveig Ball and translated by Barbara Haviland. This had been on the shortlist for the International Booker earlier this year. And on Independent Bookstore Day, I was at Montana Book Company, and they had Volume 1 and Volume 2 on the shelf. And I got both of them, but obviously I would want to start with the first, so that is the one that I'm including in my pile of possibilities. And this is 161 pages. Here is the description of this book. Tara Selter, the heroine of On the Calculation of Volume, has involuntarily stepped off the train of time. In her world, November 18th repeats itself endlessly. Ball is hypnotic and masterful in her remixing of the endless recursive day, creating curious little folds of time and foreshadowing. Her flashbacks light up inside the text like old flashbulbs. The first volume's gravitational pull, a force inverse to its constriction, has the effect of a strong tranquilizer, but a drug under which your powers of observation only grow sharper and more acute. Give in to the book's logic, its minute movements, its thrilling shifts, its slant wit, its slowing of time, and its spell is utterly intoxicating. I've heard a lot of really great things about this book since it was longlisted for the Booker Prize, and then the International Booker, and then when it was shortlisted. I had initially resisted the book because it's part of a series of 7 books, and it sounds a little weighty and maybe a little philosophical, but the feedback I got on it really turned me around and made me want to read it. So Shorty September would be a good time to make that happen. And that takes us to Waiting for the Barbarians by J.M. Coetzee. Coetzee is a Nobel laureate, and I have only read one of his books so far, which is Disgrace. And I've always wanted to read more. And I found this edition of Waiting for the Barbarians from the Penguin Great Books of the 20th Century, which was a series that they did in 1999 and 2000. And I just love the way they look. They all have that illustration, a photo of the author, and the opening sentence, and then French flaps, which I love. So this is also the book by Coetzee that I hear the most good about, or at least most consistently. So it makes me feel like I should catch up to it. Here's the description. For decades, the magistrate has been a loyal servant of the empire, running the affairs of a tiny frontier settlement and ignoring the impending war with the barbarians. When interrogation experts arrive, however, he witnesses the empire's cruel and unjust treatment of prisoners of war. Jolted into sympathy for their victims, he commits a quixotic act of rebellion that brands him an enemy of the state. J.M. Coetzee's prize-winning novel is a startling allegory of the war between oppressor and oppressed. The magistrate is not simply a man living through a crisis of conscience in an obscure place in remote times. His situation is that of all men living in unbearable complicity with regimes that ignore justice and decency. And I think you can see why this seems like a good book to catch up to. Maybe a little relevant to our times. Who knows? I'd have to read the book to know for sure, but it sounds great. Next is The Lost Daughter by Elena Ferrante and translated from the Italian by Anne Goldstein. Part of me also wants to try to include books like this because I did not manage to participate in Women in Translation Month this year. So this would be a way of sort of making up for that. And I forgot to tell you how many pages Waiting for the Barbarians is. It's 152. And The Lost Daughter is 140. I have seen the film adaptation of this with Olivia Colman, who is amazing in it. Right now, the only book by Elena Ferrante that I have read is the first volume of the Neapolitan Saga, and I've always felt that I should read more. You would think I would go on and read the rest of the Neapolitan Saga, but I feel like this would be a much more approachable way, being that it is so short. So this is also one of the books that is available on audio for me. So it would also be pretty easy to fit in. I think the audio is somewhere in the vicinity of 3 hours, so would be really easy to get to. Here's the description. Lida, a middle-aged divorcee, is alone for the first time in years after her 2 adult daughters leave home to live with their father in Toronto. Enjoying an unexpected sense of liberty, she heads to the Ionian coast for a vacation, but she soon finds herself intrigued by Nina, a young mother on the beach, eventually striking up a conversation with her. After Nina confides a dark secret, one seemingly trivial occurrence leads to events that could destroy Nina's family in this arresting novel. Sounds great. And the movie was pretty good too. I'd be very interested in seeing how the book is and how it compares to the film adaptation. Now, traditionally, I don't like the idea of including short story collections when I'm talking about novellas or short novels, but there are some short story collections that are under 200 pages in my shelf, and I decided to include them this year because, ultimately, why not? Here's the first of those: Delinquents and Other Escape Attempts, Linked Stories by Nick Reese Gardner. This was actually recommended to me by Morgan Talty. It's 184 pages. And this is a book that I have wanted to read, and for whatever reason, I just haven't gotten around to it. So including it in my pile of possibilities is me trying to give myself a kick in the pants to get around to doing that. Here's the description. When you're trapped in a Rust Belt town, time passes or it doesn't. The people of Westinghouse, Ohio know this better than most. In Delinquents, their personal worlds expand and collapse in on themselves as they battle addictions, build scrap metal rocket ships, and tether themselves to plans that will either get them out of Dodge or blow up in their faces. Nick Reese Gardner's linked stories portray people as they are, alternately hilarious, desperate, resilient, broken. For the characters contained in Delinquents, the crux is determining which they'll be when the music stops. Sounds really good, and like I said, it got a very good review from Morgan Talty, so I've liked his books. Why wouldn't I like a book that he recommends? The next one is something that I got back at Powell's when I was there in late September and early October last year. It's The Love of Singular Men by Victor Herringer, translated by James Young. Victor Herringer is a Brazilian author, and this book was featured on a list of recommendations for short novels on I think it was actually the Tattered Covers Instagram last year. And I had been wanting a copy of it ever since I saw that video, and I had a pretty good idea that I would be able to find it at Powell's. Sure enough, I did. So here's the description of this book. In the suburbs of Rio de Janeiro, one summer in the 1970s, a family, a husband and wife, their daughter, and their crippled teenage son, Camilo, take in an orphan named Cosme. The boys unexpectedly fall in love, but an act of violence shatters their intimate world and changes their lives forever. Decades later, when Camilo returns to his hometown, he is haunted by his first love and the long shadow of Brazil's military dictatorship. At once an incisive and unforgiving study of Brazilian society and a fluid queer coming-of-age story, Victor Herringer's exhilarating and moving novel is worthy of Machado de Assis. I think from that description, you could probably see exactly why this book appeals to me. And again, it is a short novel, as are all of these books. It is 152 pages. All right, the next one is A Pale View of Hills by Kazuo Ishiguro. I have absolutely loved The Remains of the Day and Never Let Me Go. Those are my favorite Kazuo Ishiguro books. Of the three that I have read, I was a little mixed on Clara and the Sun, but I have always wanted to read more of Ishiguro's work. Ishiguro is a Nobel laureate, and this one is one that particularly caught my eye, and this feels like a perfect excuse to try to get around to reading it. Here's the description. Here is the story of Etsuko, a Japanese woman now living alone in England, dwelling on the recent suicide of her daughter. In a novel where past and present confuse, she relives scenes of Japan's devastation in the wake of World War II. I've heard great things about this book, and like I said, Never Let Me Go is certainly one of my favorite novels of all time. I really loved The Remains of the Day, and this is 183 pages. So hopefully Clara and the Sun was just a bit of a wobble for me, and I'll be back to all hits with A Pale View of Hills. Now we have The Name of the World by Dennis Johnson. I am a fan of Dennis Johnson, and I really think he should have won a Pulitzer for Train Dreams, which is also a great book that would qualify for Shorty September. It's just a great book in general. And there's a really great audio production of that book out, and there's a film adaptation coming out. So lots of reasons to check out Train Dreams, which I also talk about in my video about the Pulitzer fiasco of 2012. I'll link that video down below. But we're here to talk about The Name of the World. Here's the description. The Name of the World is a mesmerizing portrait of a professor at a Midwestern university who has been patient in his grief after an accident takes the lives of his wife and child and has permitted that grief to enlarge him. Facing the unwelcome end of his temporary stint at the university, Reed finds himself forced to act like somebody who cares what happens to him. Tentatively, he begins to make himself make contact with a host of characters in this small academic town, souls who seem to have in common a tentativeness of their own. In this atmosphere characterized, as he says, by cynicism, occasional brilliance, and small polite terror, he manages, against all his expectations, to find people to light his way through his private labyrinth. Elegant and incisively observed, The Name of the World is Johnson at his best. Poignant, yet unsentimental, replete with the visionary, imaginative detail for which his work is known. And the book feels really short, so let's see how long it actually is. 129 pages. And like I said, I have been a fan of pretty much everything of Dennis Johnson that I have read, so I would be very curious to read more. This one is another book where I have access to the audio. It's Hondo by Louis L'Amour. You might, if you follow along, you might be wondering, why are you interested in this book? Because of my obsession with the Academy Awards. This was nominated for at least Best Supporting Actress, I believe for Geraldine Page, if I remember correctly. The really funny thing about this book is it turns out that I have read this before and I did not remember it. I have a review of it, not just a rating of it on the Storygraph, but a review. And it's not a good one. So apparently I read this and completely forgot about it. And it seems like I hated it. And that does make me pause. The fact that this is available on audio does make it feel a little bit safer to keep on this list. Because, you know, since I don't remember it, maybe this time around I can manage to make it stick and see how that goes. So here's the description of this book. If you're familiar with the movie, you know already. I haven't seen the movie yet, so here's what. He was etched by the desert's howling winds, a big, broad-shouldered man who knew the ways of the Apache and the ways of staying alive. She was a woman alone, raising a young son on a remote Arizona ranch. And between Hondo Lane and Angie Lowe was the warrior Vittorio, whose people were preparing to rise against the white men. Now the pioneer woman, the gunman, and the Apache warrior are caught in a drama of love, war, and honor. Now, I do kind of feel pretty convinced that this is going to be problematic, that it will not have aged well, but we'll see. I've kind of committed myself to rereading it. I was so shocked when I saw that I had a review of it. I really just do not remember it at all. I forgot to tell you how many pages it is, so let's do that real quick. Here we go. 179. Now we have Boy Meets Boy by David Levithan. Now, some of these shorties had been on my pile of possibilities for Pride Month, but Pride is something that you can celebrate all year long, and I want to read these books anyway, so this is the first of those. This is the story of Paul, a sophomore at a high school like no other. The cheerleaders ride Harleys. The homecoming queen used to be a guy named Daryl. She now prefers Infinite Darlene and is also the star quarterback. And the Gay Straight Alliance was formed to help the straight kids learn how to dance. When Paul meets Noah, he thinks he's found the one his heart is made for, until he blows it. The school bookie says the odds are 12-1 against him getting Noah back, but Paul's not giving up without playing his love really loud. His best friend Joni might be drifting away, his other best friend Tony might be dealing with ultra-religious parents, and his ex-boyfriend Kyle might not be going away anytime soon, but sometimes everything needs to fall apart before it can really fit together. This is a happy, meaningful, romantic comedy about finding love, losing love, and doing what it takes to get love back in a crazy, wonderful world. And this is another one where the audio is available, so that would be a really great way to cross this one off of my list. I've read The Lover's Dictionary by David Levithan and Two Boys Kissing, and I really liked both of those books. And this book is complicated because it has a chapter from another book by David Levithan and then a reader's guide. I think it's an interview with David Levithan on, this is the 10th anniversary edition of the book. So it is 185 pages. Next, another short story collection, because this one in particular is something that I really want to get to, because Thomas McGuane is an author that I have wanted to read since moving to Montana. I have another collection of his short stories on my bookshelf called Cloudburst. That is not a shorty, but this one is under 200 pages and it is coming out in October. In fact, it is October 14th. So if you follow the link down below, it would be for a pre-order, just FYI. And Thomas McGuane is a Montana author, so it has a connection to where I live, but also I've just heard really good things about his books. And he's regarded as one of the contemporary masters of the short story. So obviously I want to read his short stories. 9 shattering, hilarious tales of men on the outskirts of America, habituating the motels, hot dog stands, and dive bars time forgot, grappling with a world that is swiftly changing, and dreaming of a return to the wooded shores of their youth. I think we got a title. Crackling with wry humor, shot through with both wisdom and pain, these are stories of grifters and dreamers, of the lovelorn and the lawless, stories of the ongoing dissonance between the lives we want and the lives this world will allow. And again, I feel like you can guess why I'm so interested in this book from that description, if you have been following along for a while. This is 177 pages. Okay. Now we have a book that I hauled just last month, The Pumpkin Eater by Penelope Mortimer. This one is also, credit due to my obsession with the Oscars. There was a film adaptation of The Pumpkin Eater starring Anne Bancroft. She was nominated for Best Actress for it at the Academy Awards. So I was naturally really interested when I saw this book on a display at a bookstore and thought to myself, I bet you that's what the movie was based on. Picked it up, and sure enough, it is. So, The Pumpkin Eater is a surreal black comedy about the wages of adulthood and the pitfalls of parenthood. A nameless woman speaks, at first from the precarious perch of a therapist's couch, and her smart, wry, confiding, immensely sympathetic voice immediately captures and holds our attention. And then once I read this, I can watch the movie, because a lot of the time I do try to read the book before I see the movie. Now, this one, I'm just remembering as I looked at the page count, does sort of stretch my own limit. It's not under 200 pages. It's 222 pages. But since the Shorty September people did define it as under 200 or under 250, depending on your preference, and this is a book that I'm really curious about, I'm including it here. My channel, my rules. All right, now we have We All Want Impossible Things by Catherine Newman. Catherine Newman wrote the book Sandwich, which I enjoyed. She wrote the forthcoming Wreck, which I also really enjoyed. And her first novel was We All Want Impossible Things. I saw this in a bookstore near me, and I picked it up. I read the description, and as soon as I read the description, I really wanted to read this book. And just the fact that I have already read 2 books by Catherine Newman and really enjoyed them, that's just icing on the cake. Here's the description. Edith and Ashley have been best friends for over 42 years. They've shared the mundane and the momentous together. Trick-or-treating and binge drinking, Gilligan's Island reruns and REM concerts, hickeys and heartbreak, surprise Scottish wakes, marriages, infertility, and children. As Ash says, Eddie's memory is like the backup hard drive for mine. But now the unthinkable has happened. Eddie is dying of ovarian cancer and spending her last days at a hospice near Ash, who stumbles into heartbreak surrounded by her daughter's ex-ish husband, dear friends, a poorly chosen lover or 2, and a rotating cast of beautifully, fleetingly human hospice characters. As the Fiddler on the Roof soundtrack blasts all day long from the room next door, Eddie and Ash reminisce, hold on, and try to let go. Meanwhile, Ash struggles with being an imperfect friend, wife, and parent, with life, in other words, distilled into its heartbreaking, joyful, and comedic essence. For anyone who's ever lost a friend or had one, get ready to laugh through your tears. Now, the audio is also available of this on Libby, so that's probably the way I would do it. And if you follow along, Joel and I have been on a bit of a grief journey over the last few years, and this would probably land particularly hard after losing a very, very close friend of ours at the end of last year. but I feel like I'm at a point in the grieving process where, I think I would find a little bit of catharsis from a book like this. So hopefully that is what I will get if I pick it up this month. Here are the acknowledgements, and this is 205 pages, so it slightly stretches my own personal limitation, but it is what it is. Now, just a warning, this one looks like it is not a shorty, but let me explain. It's The Country Girls by Edna O'Brien. So yeah, this looks like a massive brick of a book. You could hurt somebody with this. Don't know why you would, but you could. However, this is a collection of 3 novellas and an epilogue to those novellas. I've already read the first 2, so really the one that is on my pile of possibilities for this month is, I believe it's Girls in Their Married Bliss. But it doesn't actually have like a table of contents. Oh, here we go. Yes, Girls in Their Married Bliss, which starts on page 381, and then the epilogue begins on page 511. Now, I am not going to do the math, but so 491. Yeah, it's under 200 pages. So you see how bad I am at math. Edna O'Brien died recently, and I really wanted to read The Country Girls before Joel and I went to Ireland. I managed to read the first one, The Country Girls, before we went. And then after Edna O'Brien died, I read the second book in the trilogy, and I would love to finish this up. Here's the description. The Country Girls trilogy and epilogue charts unflinchingly the pattern of women's lives, from the high spirits of youth to the chill of middle age, from hope to despair, in remarkable prose swinging from blunt and brutal to whimsical and lyrical. It is a saga both painful and hilarious, and remains one of the major accomplishments of Edna O'Brien's extraordinary career. The Country Girls and the second book in the series were both banned in Ireland upon publication, and The Lonely Girl was the second book in the trilogy. And they are really remarkable. So the first 2 stories take place when our central characters, Kathleen and Baba, are young. The middle-age part will come with Girls in Their Wedded Bliss. And I really loved the first 2, so I am looking forward to that. Now we have The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa and translated by Stephen Snyder. I have heard so many good things about this book, and I've had this beautiful vintage Japan edition of it for a couple of years at this point without getting to it. So hopefully Shorty September will encourage me to finally take the plunge and read it. Yoko Ogawa's The Housekeeper and the Professor is an enchanting story about what it means to live in the present and about the curious equations that can create a family. He is a brilliant math professor with a peculiar problem. Ever since a traumatic head injury, he has lived with only 80 minutes of short-term memory. She is an astute young housekeeper with a 10-year-old son who is hired to care for him. And every morning, as the professor and the housekeeper are introduced to each other anew, a strange and beautiful relationship blossoms between them. Though he cannot hold memories for long, his brain is like a tape that begins to erase itself every 80 minutes, the professor's mind is still alive with elegant equations from the past. And the numbers, in all their articulate order, reveal a sheltering and poetic world to both the housekeeper and her young son. The professor is capable of discovering connections between the simplest of quantities, like the housekeeper's shoe size, and the universe at large, drawing their lives ever closer and more profoundly together, even as his memory slips away. I've heard, as I said, so many good things about this book, which also has really beautiful end papers and French flaps, which I just absolutely adore. It is 180 pages. The next book is All We Shall Know by Donal Ryan. Now, I do have another book by Donal Ryan, and there is a different one that has been very specifically recommended to me, but this is the one that meets our criteria for Shorty September. And if I read this one, at least I can say I have read a Donal Ryan book. Melody Shee is alone and in trouble. At 33 years old, she finds herself pregnant with the child of a 17-year-old traveler boy, Martin Toppy, and not by her husband, Pat. Uh-oh. Melody was teaching Martin to read, but now he's gone and Pat leaves too, full of rage. She's trying to stay in the moment, but the future is looming while the past won't let her go. It's a good thing that she meets Mary Crothery when she does. Mary is a bold young traveler woman, and she knows more about Melody than she lets on. She might just save Melody's life. Following the 9 months of her pregnancy, all we shall know unfolds with emotional immediacy in Melody's fierce, funny, and unforgettable voice as she contends with her choices, past and present. I've heard a lot of great things about Donal Ryan as a writer, and this book is 180 pages. I've really been on a journey with Irish fiction and enjoying it recently, so I would love to continue that with both Edna O'Brien and Donal Ryan. Now we have one of the books that I have owned for the longest, Balzac and the Little Chinese Seamstress by Dai Siji. Balzac and the Little Chinese Seamstress is an enchanting tale that captures the magic of reading and the wonder of romantic awakening. An immediate international bestseller, it tells the story of two hapless city boys exiled to a remote mountain village for re-education during China's infamous Cultural Revolution. There, the two friends meet the daughter of the local tailor and discover a hidden stash of Western classics in Chinese translation. As they flirt with the seamstress and secretly devour these banned books, the two friends find transit from their grim surroundings to worlds they never imagined. And this is another one that is available to me on audio. I've had this book for so long that I would really like to finally get around to it. I've been holding on. It has beautiful end papers as well. I'm looking for the copyright date. It's 2001. That's the date of the copyright for the English translation, which is by Ina Rilke. And I'm pretty sure I bought this book not long after it was published in the United States. So I've had this book for 24 years, possibly, and I have not gotten around to reading it. This would be a great time to do that. It is 184 pages, and the audio would be a great way to go, but if I get to it in print, all the better. Going back to my obsession with the Academy Awards, Mrs. Miniver by Jan Struther. I just found a copy of this book recently in a used bookstore, and I would love to read it. I remember enjoying the movie. Here's the description. If you've seen the movie, again, you know what this is about. But for those who don't, the beloved classic of an English housewife bravely enduring World War II, the basis for the Academy Award-winning film starring Greer Garson. Greer Garson won Best Actress, Teresa Wright won Best Supporting Actress, it won Best Director for William Wyler, and it won Best Picture in 1944. Winston Churchill once remarked that Mrs. Miniver, the fictional British housewife featured in Jan Struther's newspaper columns about quotidian English life, did more for the Allied cause than a flotilla of battleships. As tensions rose across Europe, Mrs. Miniver's domestic concerns expanded from automobiles and Christmas shopping to include gas masks, keeping calm, and carrying on. An international sensation when it was first published, this novelized collection of those columns won America's heart and broad public support for entering World War II. The book and the movie, but as a consequence, are credited with helping encourage the United States to enter the war. Obviously, Pearl Harbor as well, but this is sort of unofficially credited with opening the door a little bit. And Mrs. Miniver's story was so essential to Allied morale that when William Wyler's film adaptation was made, President Roosevelt ordered it rushed to theaters. And there you have it. This is 161 pages. I have 2 more books on my pile of possibilities, and then we will be done. Next is Winter in the Blood by James Welch. Actually, this is another author, more specifically, who was recommended to me by Morgan Talty. And James Welch is another Montana author I have been meaning to read. I feel like reading his books would be a prerequisite for some of my Pulitzer projects, where I'm reading all of the books that have won a Pulitzer Prize for fiction. Obviously, he never did, but the fact of him being overlooked feels consequential to some of the discussions I would like to have with books that I still have to get to for that project. Here's the description. During his life, James Welch came to be regarded as a master of American prose, and his first novel, Winter in the Blood, is one of his most enduring works. The narrator of this beautiful, often disquieting novel is a young Native American man living on the Fort Belknap Reservation in Montana. Sensitive and self-destructive, he searches for something that will bind him to the lands of his ancestors, but is haunted by personal tragedy, the dissolution of his once proud heritage, and Montana's vast emptiness. Winter in the Blood is an evocative and unforgettable work of literature that will continue to move and inspire anyone who encounters it. I mean, sold, and sold. And it's a shorty too, so, I mean, they're all shorties. 176 pages. The last book on my pile of possibilities for Pride Month is A Boy's Own Story by Edmund White. If you follow along, you may remember in June when I set out my pile of possibilities for Pride Month, I included A Boy's Own Story. And I stated that my mission this past June was to read at least one of 3 authors that I have been meaning to get to for a very long time. Colm to Bean, Edmund White, and Paul Monette. I got to Colm to Bean. And I really wanted to get to A Boy's Own Story because Edmund White died just before June. And that felt like a good time to do it. But my reading ended up going in a different direction. I didn't manage to squeeze it in during the month of June. So I'm giving myself a bonus round in Shorty September to see if I can get around to reading this book. Here's the description. Ridiculed by his classmates and beset by aloof parents and a cruel sister, the unnamed narrator of Edmund White's first autobiographical novel finds solace in literature, works of art, and his own fantastic imagination. But as he strives to forge new friendships, his yearning to be loved by the men in his life evokes a crushing sense of shame and a struggle to accept who he is. Lyrical and poignant, A Boy's Own Story, the first of a trilogy followed by The Beautiful Room is Empty and The Farewell Symphony, is an American literary treasure that became an instant classic upon publication for its pioneering portrayal of homosexuality. And if you follow along, you know exactly why that appeals to me and why I have been desperate to read this book for several years. And to finish things off, it is 196 pages. So, those are the books that I will be sort of pulling from. Again, they're not the only ones that I will be pulling from. If you're curious, The Names by Florence Knapp, which I can't show you because it's out of reach. I had to clear a room on my desk. That has also been on my pile of possibilities. And those are 2 books that I'm reading. And I really want to get back to Gilead. So those are the 2 books I would say in addition to these shorties, if you want like a bonus round. But those are the books that I will be pulling from specifically to participate in Shorty September. I really love short novels and novellas. I find that at least in this moment, I feel more impressed when an author manages to achieve something great in a short page count. It just really impresses me. I love that economy that packs a punch. So I'm looking forward to picking from these. If you have recommendations for which ones you think I should prioritize, let me know in the comment section down below. Let me know what's on your pile of possibilities, and maybe I'll end up adding something to my list, or you'll inspire other people who are coming here. And if you have recommendations, let me know those as well. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.